There are men who practice law as a profession to obtain justice for others, and there are men who practice it as a form of burglary conducted with legalese, stationery, charm, and in billable hours. Without compunction, Emily's brother, Eric Westbrook, comfortably situated himself in the latter of these two categories. He sat that evening in his corner office on the top floor of South Station Tower, high above Boston, where beneath him trains entered and departed like passing thoughts through the skull of the city. The floor-to-ceiling glass windows behind his desk reflected a man of polish, charm, and an insatiable appetite for money and power. He was Harvard Law School all the way, with an Armani suit, a silk tie, gold cufflinks, and a titanium Rolex watch on his wrist. But his hands were dirty, covered with greed, scandal, and the filth that comes with being a criminal defense attorney. He had a smile that appeared genuine, but it was no more than a pretext to cover up his next intentional misdeed and his pervasive misanthropy. He believed what was his is his, and what is yours is his. This was his moral justification for taking things of value that did not belong to him. You remember Eric Westbrook? He is Emily Westbrook's older brother, the attorney who walked into the Ashwick police station and extracted her from the custody of Detective Miller with the efficiency of a locksmith. You recall, she was being held as an accomplice in the murders committed by Thomas Martin. Criminal defense attorneys, like undertakers, sometimes develop professional instincts around death. For Eric, it was his sixth sense, and he smelled money everywhere there was misfortune. For several weeks, Eric watched the Thomas Martin case receive national news media attention. The death whisperer, the genealogist and mortician who claimed that he himself was dead and therefore immune from criminal prosecution. The cemetery, the coffins, the text messages from beyond. To the public, it was a spectacle of horror. To Eric Westbrook, it was a potential gold mine. That evening he called his sister Emily. Dinner, he said warmly. Like old times, just you and me. She met him at a small Italian bistro in the North End, where the distance between tables was narrow, the wine expensive, and the candlelight foreshadowing betrayal. At first, Eric played the concerned big brother. He asked how she was sleeping, whether reporters had bothered her, whether she had considered leaving Ashwick for a while. Then, gradually, the questions changed. When did Martin first mention the texts? How many messages? Were they only from our family? What exactly was found in the coffins? Did you see the train station yourself? Her appetizer growing cold, Emily lowered her fork. Eric, this feels like a deposition. He smiled. I'm your loyally older brother. We ask questions when we care. But Eric did not care as a brother cared. He cared as a prospector cared when told that there might be gold beneath his feet. Naive Emily, uneasy and tired, told Eric everything. The text messages Martin received from his grandfather. The text message Melissa Carey received from her deceased husband Mark. The private cemetery, the digging, the gravestones, the invitations, the voices, the personal objects from Martin's childhood found inside his grandmother's coffin, the train station Martin claimed had risen in his backyard. Every word Emily spoke was a skeleton key opening a padlock in Eric's mind. Thomas Martin possessed something no corporation, no church, no government, no grieving billionaire, no human had ever successfully acquired. Actual, verifiable contact with the dead. And now, Eric intended to acquire it all. By dessert, Eric had stopped listening as a brother entirely. He was preoccupied drafting contracts in his head, a trust, a licensing agreement, a media company, a spiritual communications enterprise dressed as research, and if necessary, blackmailing Thomas Martin to obtain them. The mortuary, the cemetery, the house, the land, all of it could be pressured out of Thomas Martin, a man under indictment, disgraced before the nation, and foolish enough to represent himself in court. When they parted outside the restaurant, Emily left feeling used. She watched Eric disappear into a waiting limousine and understood too late that she had not confessed to her brother. She had armed him. And now it is time for us to take a brief respite to listen to an intermezzo conceived by world-renowned composer E. Dudek, after which the saga of Thomas Martin will resume. We continue. The next morning, Eric Westbrook began constructing his ambush. He requested prison visitation forms. He contacted a documentary producer. He contacted a real estate attorney within his law firm. He made discreet inquiries about Ashford zoning laws, cemetery regulations, and whether a private mortuary could be transferred while its owner awaited trial for murder. By noon, he had a yellow legal pad filled with arrows, dollar signs, and one phrase circled 3 times: control the property, control the dead. That was the fatal flaw in Eric Westbrook's theory of action. He assumed the dead could be controlled. At Quantico, Peter Hayward prepared for 2 journeys of his own. The first would take him to Newport, Rhode Island, a trip to the Newport sweet shop, where a receipt showed that the poisoned Godiva chocolates had been purchased the day after Thanksgiving 1 year earlier. The second would take him to Batesville, Indiana, to the Batesville Casket Company's factory, the place where 42 coffins were manufactured and tagged with serial numbers that the company's chief financial officer insisted never existed. Hayward had grown thinner since the coffins arrived. His necrophobia had not left him. It had mutated. He no longer feared only coffins. He feared what might be controlling them. Before leaving Quantico, he stood once more beside his evidence board. Unidentified fingerprints, saliva belonging to Martin's murdered family, unrecorded caskets, poisoned chocolates. This pattern was no longer merely forensic. It was intentional, not manslaughter, but homicide. Hayward whispered, "Who bought the chocolates?" Behind him, one of the sealed coffins creaked, not open, just slightly cracked, like a throat clearing. Hayward did not turn around. His recent experiences taught him that there were answers a man should not invite too casually. 25 miles from Ashwick, Thomas Martin sat in his prison cell planning for his trial, the trial of the century. He had received book offers, interview requests, and letters from strangers begging him to speak to dead husbands, dead children, dead lovers, and even dead enemies. He sorted them carefully, not by sympathy, but by usefulness. Martin was pragmatic. His notoriety, though unwelcome at first, had become a Stradivarius in his hands. If the world insisted on making him a spectacle, then he would use that spectacle to procure his release from prison. A whisper moved down the prison corridor. "Justice." Martin paused. Again, "Justice." He looked toward the bars of his cell. "I am preparing," he said. The whisper became many, not angry, not pleading, organized, like a jury murmuring during deliberations. "Justice." Then the impossible cell phone beneath his mattress vibrated. One message appeared. "An attorney is coming." Martin frowned. Another message followed. "Not yours." Then, "He wants the station." Martin read that line over and over again. For the first time in many days, Martin smiled, not with joy, but with recognition. Then he is already too late, Martin said softly. And then far beneath the prison floor, something answered, the sound of steel wheels grinding. That night, Emily returned to Ashwick feeling as though she had sold the key to a locked room whose occupants had never consented to visitors. She sat at her kitchen table in darkness. Her cell phone rested on a placemat before her. At 11:13 p.m., the phone lit. Same unknown number. The message read, "Your brother has filed an appearance." Emily covered her mouth. A second message arrived. "Counsel will be heard." At that exact moment in Boston, Eric Westbrook's office lights flickered. He looked up from the documents scattered across his desk. The glass wall behind him no longer viewed the Boston skyline. It reflected a railway platform, a hanging lantern, 42 coffins stacked like luggage, and at the far end of the platform, there stood a faceless conductor waiting patiently. Eric turned slowly. His office door opened by itself. From the hallway came the faint sound of a train whistle. Then his cell phone pinged. One message. "Mr. Westbrook, your consultation is confirmed." Eric stared. Below him, South Station rumbled with arriving trains, but none sounded like the one now approaching from inside the walls. And here we leave Eric Westbrook, attorney at law, a man who believes that every mystery has a market and that every miracle can be placed under contract. But where Eric was heading, there were properties no deed can convey, litigants no subpoena can summon, and clients who are hostile witnesses. Somewhere between Boston and Ashwick, between greed and judgment, another passenger had received notice, and the train, as usual, is running behind schedule for its next stop at the Conflation Station.